உள்ளதல துள்ள உணர் உள்ளதோ உள்ள பொருள் உள்ளல் அற உள்ளத்தே உள்ளதா உள்ளம் எனும் உள்ள பொருள் உள்ளல் எவன் உள்ளத்தே உள்ளபடி உள்ளதே உள்ளல் உணர்வாயே. Namo Ramana. With Bhagavan's immense grace, we are going on to verse number 22 in our meditation on the verses of Ulladu Narpadu. Madikuli tandam madikul olirum madiyinai ulle madaki padiyir பதித்திடுதல் அன்றி பதியை மதியால் மதித்திடுதல் எங்கன் மதியாய். As we have been contemplating earlier, the verse numbers 8 to 22 Vidyaji, you are still hearing some static?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it now coming and going like that?
Yes, I don't know if it's only me, but I'm hearing a lot of background noise here.
No, even I am hearing it, sir.
Yeah, they are doing some furniture work nearby. So we'll take it as Shruti note and we'll go. They are also praying to God in their own way, I think. In these verses, I can continue, Dr. Akka?
Yeah, yes, sir. Actually, when you are silent, it's not happening. That's why I'm wondering whether it's the noise at the background.
Oh.
Only when you are speaking.
Is anybody else on live mode?
What is your thought on that? Is it so? It's not when uncle is speaking, is it? Yeah. It could be, it could be. Because now when he is silent, okay.
No, see, now you are hearing, isn't it?
Yes, sir, it's intermittent. It's not when you are speaking. Yes, it must be the background only. We can continue, sir.
Bhagavan gives us some background music. The verses 8 to 22, we were trying to understand as dealing with something holding which the creation was rising. Of course, Bhagavan doesn't use the word creation or world, but since he had started off the verse 8 as Epairit Yaguruvil Ethinum, and in Jnana Marga, the names given are probably not the names of gods, but names of principles or substances that are popularly known in the Jnana Marga. So, Bhagavan starts off with Irantaigal, Mukkudigal, and then goes on till he comes to Vidimadi, Mula Vivekam Ilarke, Vidimadi Vellum Vivadam. Then, in the 20th, 21st and 22nd, Bhagavan lets go of the other concepts. He directly starts focusing on that holding which the world, the jnana world arises. The jnana world, of course, is taken to be adhara for the stula world. The stula world cannot arise without the jnana world of Arivum Ariyamayum or Vidimadi or Nigalvu. So, all these are arising, holding on to one. And that one, as is popularly known in religion as the God who creates, maintains, and absorbs, that one holding on to which all these arise. The Arivum Ariyamayum arc, when we inquire, then as we hold that eye, then we go to the source of all Arivu and Ariyamai and go to that Arivu which is beyond the duality, says Bhagavan. So, we were discussing those 8 to 22 verses as verses telling us about what is in normal connotation taken as God, the personal God or the Purusha. When we go into the chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita, I am not an expert on Bhagavad Gita, but only for Bhagavad Gita Sara, I have gone into the Gita. But the chapter 12 is the end of Bhakti Marga or the culmination of Bhakti Marga and the beginning of chapter 13, which is the Asipadatvam or the Jnana Marga, which begins from chapter 13. Of course, Gita itself, it is said, is a representation or a manifestation of the Tat Tvam Asi, the Tvam Padam, the individual being covered from the first 6 chapters, all what the sadhaka has to do, and the chapter 7 to 12 are supposed to cover the Tat, the God whom we are worshipping. Then Asi, that both are unified in Asipadatva, that the Supreme Being and the individual being are one and the same, Asipadatvam. That Asipadatvam is what is there in chapters 13 onwards till 18, is one of the popular ways of understanding we have of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, we find that Bhagavan in the verse number 20, 21 and 22, he covers exactly about the nature of that Tat, that God whom we take as that supreme individual holding on to whom the whole creation arises. The holding on to whom the dualities and triads, they arise. So in these verses, Bhagavan in 20th, he begins by saying that Kanam Tanevittu Tan Kadavulai Kana Kanam Manomayam Kashitale Kanum Avan Tan Kadavul Kandana Tan Mudalai Tan Mudal Puach Tan Kadavul Andriyagala. So Kanum Tanevittu. So how the Tvam becomes merged in Tat, Bhagavan says that you have to hold the Tvam and seek the source of the Tvam. Then you will meet the Tat, you will meet the supreme individual being or the personal deity or God, whom we call by different names. But that being, that entity will be met with when we go holding the Tvam, holding whoever I am. Who am I when we hold? Kanum Tanaivitte, but instead of doing that, when we see that I am seeing God, Bhagavan says, it is a Manomaya Kakshi. It is only a projection of the mind. Manomaya Kakshitane Kanumavar Tan Kadavul Kandana Tan Mudalai Tan Mudal Poi. So Tan Kadavul Andriyalada. That was verse number 20, where Bhagavan said that you have to hold the Tvam Padam, seek the truth of the Tvam Padam, of course, in the established truth of the Tat Padam, so that the Asipadatvam becomes a reality, becomes the reality that both the Tvam Padam and Tat Padam are in fact merged and one and the same in the Asipadatvam, in the being. Then comes the verse number 21, where Bhagavan covers almost like the Vamana Avatara, the whole of the Karma Marga and a major part of the sadhanas in Yoga and Bhakti Marga, which involves lot of usage of the Upadhis. So Bhagavan covers all that. That is chapter number 1 to 6, 6 to 12, till almost the end of chapter 12 in Gita. Bhagavan covers in verse number 21, Tannaitan Kanal, Talaivan Tanai Kanal, Ennum Pannulunmai Ennayalil. This carnal word is used, seeing is used as an explicit karma, an explicit doing. So, Tannaitan Kanal, Talaivan Tanai Kanal, this karnal is to be taken as the root of the whole of karma, and whatever is karma based offerings in both yoga and jnana marga, quite a lot of sadhanas are prescribed where the upadhis are used as a work, but then the being fixed in the supreme being in yoga or offering it to God, that is the difference between the direct karma marga and the bhakti marga. But all those are covered by this one verse of Bhagavan, that Tannaitan Kanal, Talaivan Tanai Kanal, Ennum Pannulunmai Ennayalil. Tannaitan Kanalevan, Tan Ondral, Kana Onade. Talaivan Kanalevan, Unadal Kan. Since the I inside is one, there is no seeing there. There is no, all the karmas get merged in this very root karma. That is why Bhagavan says to Natanananda Swamigal that the being still in self-attention is no indolence, is no laziness. It is Mulu Muyarchi, it is Purna Karma. It is the ultimate karma. Why? Bhagavan says, in all other works, in all other doings, part of the mind is employed and the work is done with frequent breaks, whereas in the act of trying to see oneself, Tannaitan Kanam, in that Muyarchi, the whole mind has to be employed and there cannot be breaks, because both the mind and the breaks are the non-self. So you are not saying Tannaitan Kanal. So in that Tannaitan Kanal, or being still, there is Mulu Muyarchi. The whole of karma gets into fruition, or the ultimate skill in action is brought out by Bhagavan in that action of being still. Any problem one faces, what is the highest action one can do in resolving that? It is the Mulu Muyarchi of asking for whom is this problem. That is then the whole field of problem and solution, and the person who has to face the problem and solution gets dissolved in that act of stillness. So, Tannaitan Kanal, Talaivan Tanai Kanal, Ennum Pannulunmai Ennayalil. Tannaitan Kanalevan, Tanundral Kanavanade. Talaivan Kanalavan, if you cannot see yourself even, Where is the question of seeing? That adhara, the substrate of your being. Therefore, offering everything and oneself as the food for that self is real seeing. Unadal Khan, to offer everything that could be seen or that could belong to oneself, offer all that and also oneself to that supreme being as food and be one with that. That is how far we have come in our contemplation of these verses. We are coming to the final verse on the God, that is 22nd verse. This covers the Jnana Marga, all the disciplines of Jnana Marga that are mentioned in the end part of chapter 12. Because in chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna starts by asking, what is the difference between the devotee who worships the personal deity or the individual Purusha, the Supreme Purusha, and what is the difference between him and the Jnani who goes for that all-inclusive pure Sat, all-inclusive pure Sat, which is beyond the mind. And Sri Krishna takes out that rest of that chapter 12, which is the end of Bhakti Marga, in taking one from Anya Bhakti to Ananya Bhakti. He calls the worship of that supreme being, which is all inclusive but beyond everything, which is nameless and formless, that he calls as Ananya Bhakti. So, Jnana, another name for Jnana is Ananya Bhakti. It is not different from Bhakti. So, just as the Tvam Padam and Tat Padam merge in Asipadam, all these margas merge in the silence of Mauna. All the rivers of various paths merge in the Mauna of, or the ocean of Mauna, says Bhagavan. So we come to the verse number 22. Before that, just a small clue from Kanakamal, which we can remember for what is this? The holding which everything arises. Holding which everything arises, which we have been discussing, all these verses 8 to 22. Kanakamal gracefully gives us a clue. Right at the beginning of the introduction she gives to Ulladu Narpadu, Amma goes somewhat like this. விளக்கின் உதவி கொண்டு பொருள்களை அறிவது போல் சாதகனின் அறிவை தூண்டி தன்னைத்தான் அறிவதற்கு உரிய மெய் உணர்வை அளிக்க வல்லது அரிய நூல். I'll repeat that. விளக்கின் உதவி கொண்டு பொருள்களை அறிவது போல், just as the holding the lamp we are able to see objects, சாதகனின் அறிவை தூண்டி, by kindling the or awakening the spirit, the knowledge within the sadhaka, தன்னைத்தான் அறிவதற்கு உரிய மெய் உணர்வு, to behold the self, to know the self, to be the self. You cannot have anything but மெய் உணர்வு, உரிய மெய் உணர்வு, she says. To hold the self, which is beyond time, beyond place, which is eternal, which is ever existing. Can you have a knowledge that is flickering? Can you have a knowledge that is going outward, holding a body as I? No, says Kanakamal. You can have only a Mei Unarva. Mei Unarva is the existence consciousness. And what that Mei Unarva's job is, the Mei Unarva's job is not anything else, not creation, maintenance, destruction. Its main existential reason for that is to know its own eternal being. That's why Isha Jivayo Vesha Dhipita Satsvabhavato Vastu Kevalam. In the Satsvabhava, both the Tvampadam and Tatpadam merge in the Asipadatvam. That is, can you see the Sadvastu with a unarva, with a knowledge that is flickering, that is identified with a particular particle? Absolutely not. It has to be a main unarva. The knowledge also has to be a true or real knowledge. That is when that real knowledge then merges into the reality. The reality absorbs that. So a clue that Kanakamal gives us is that, and which will help us in re-reflecting on the first verse. The Ulladala, Ulla Unarvu, that Ulla Unarvu is what Kanakamal calls here as May Unarvu. May Unarvu is the Tatpadam, the Ishwaratva, holding which all the other things arise, but that May Unarvu, this Purana can have variations. It is the Shakti, therefore its reality comes about only when it gets absorbed or when it understands this and settles without asking anything from the Asipadam. Therefore, the Tatpadam also merges there. That May Unarvu is holding which everything arises is a hint given. Of course, other than the self, none of this can be held on. Like, because they will then resolve into the next support, like that. Therefore, a hint is that all these 8 to 22 verses is about the May Unarvu, but not stopping at the May Unarvu absorbing into the May Padam or the May Porul, Ulla Porul, like that. Therefore, coming back to this verse, I suppose enough background we have done work on 8 to 22. Now, a little bit understanding of this verse 22, then we go for the completion of 8 to 22. If you have any doubts, you can post it in the group. The 22nd verse, Madikku Oli Tandam, Madikkul Olirum. Madikku Oli Tandu, Bhagavan says, the mind in who am I? Bhagavan says, he is the knower of everything, and since it is the knower of everything, it is also responsible for all the actions. So in one sentence, Bhagavan says it is at the root of all knowing and doing. So all knowing and doing are in the mind, but that mind itself, is it having its own awareness? Like whenever Bhagavan asks that question, does the body say I? It's very clear that for us, the body does not say I. And when he refers to deep sleep, it is so clear to us that the body does not have a consciousness of its own. But some inquiry is required to understand that the mind also doesn't have consciousness of its own. It is a possession, and it is given by this Purana. It is the Madikku Oli is given by the Atma Swarupa. Of course, this Purana has to get absorbed in Ulla Porul. Therefore, Kanakamal says it is the Ulla Porul which gives the light to this Purana and the Madi. Madikku Oli Tandu. Madikkul Olirum. The Supreme Self is shining as this Purana inside the mind. Whereas the mind is able to see things outside. It is able to know the objective things. It can be used for knowing concepts that are other than the ego. It can know. The mind can know and measure. But inside that Madi is shining self-luminously the self. Madikkul Olirum. Madine Ulle Madaki. Turn the mind, other than turning the mind inward and fixing it in the self, Padil Padithidal Andri, other than turning the mind inward within itself by asking, who am I? And fixing it in the self, can we ever hope to Padiyai Madiyal Madithididal Yengan. Can we ever hope to measure or evaluate or know the self using the mind as an instrument? When it is a restrictive instrument, it is a conditioned instrument, can it ever be able to know its source? No, it cannot, is the meaning that we come to. The whole verse can be summarized as there is the supreme existence, supreme being, which is not even referred to as the Purusha, the individual. It is the supreme being, which Kanakamal says, it rises and shines and gives light to the Madi. Now, it is shining where? It is shining within the mind. It is shining within the mind. And the mind itself is an instrument which can measure only things outside itself. Like the eye, it cannot see itself. It can only allow consciousness to go through it and see things outside of itself. Similarly, the mind too cannot see what is within it, but it can go through and of course, one has to understand that what is the Madi according to Bhagavan? The mind is the I thought that rises within the body. That is the first thought itself is called as the mind. Therefore, every other thought is outside that. And the eye cannot see within itself is the indication. Madikoli Tandam, Madikul Volirum. The supreme being is shining within the mind. So the Padi, the word Padi here refers to the supreme being. Of course, since in the context of verse 8 to 22, we can say that it covers the verses up to the verses contained in Gita up to chapter 12, which are all about the Purusha, the individual. But the Purusha himself has to merge in the being, in the reality of the being. In fact, Bhagavad Gita Sara of Bhagavan starts with verses from chapter 13, the Asipadatvam, the Tattvam Asi. In that, the Asipadatvam only Bhagavan starts. That is Kshetram. That the Kshetram and Kshetrajna. About the knowledge of this, that is what is the essence of Jnana. That is how Bhagavan starts the Bhagavad Gita Saram. And then goes ahead, about the Kshetram, we find only one verse, whereas the description of Kshetram in chapter 13, it goes on over many verses. And Bhagavan condenses all that in one verse. Jatasya hi dhruvor mrityu, dhruvor janmam mritasya cha, he says. That whichever is born or that whichever appears is bound to die or is bound to disappear. And that which is supposed to have attained death or disappearance is bound to be born again or appear again. That was something we were spending some time on while discussing the Bhagavad Gita Saram. How is it that death necessarily means rebirth? Because until jnana or the fruition of surrender happens, the birth and death cycle is supposed to continue, because one has not understood the essence of the life that is conditioned. One has to remain in that conditioned existence till the sadhana attains fruition, and the ever-existing reality makes that whole journey unreal. The whole journey of conditioned existence vanishes as unreal in the reality of the Supreme. But of course, we are jumping ahead. This verse, Madikoli Tandam, Madikul Volirum, Madinai Ulle Madaki, Padil Padithididalendri, Padiyai Madiyal Madithididal. The first thing we understand is that the Madi is a Jadavastu, that it does not have the consciousness of its own. The consciousness is a borrowed consciousness. Therefore, if you seek the source of the consciousness, then you will find the Asipadatvam. That is, in Upadesha Saram, Bhagavan says, Manasam tu kim, margane krite, naiva manasam. the Jadavastu will vanish, and the pure consciousness alone, which cannot be eliminated, will remain, is the essence of the sadhana in those verses. But here, how the pure existence or the padi, how you can measure with your mind? You cannot measure with the mind, which is a Jadavastu. The Purnavastu is Chaitanyam, the mind is Jadavastu. But when it tries to attempt the Guru's Upadesha, Manasam tu kim margane krite, then Bhagavan says, Bunnir nadipolum oime. That is, just like all the other rivers and lakes and every water, when they reach the ocean, they lose their name and they lose their volition and merge into that one reality. Similarly, the mind, in whatever form it might have started the sadhana, the moment it understands Guru Upadesha, and with the grace of Guru Upadesha, which is nothing other than the self, it searches for the truth of itself. Swam Chinnata, Chinvata, Swam Chinvata. It has to investigate into who am I. The mind has to inquire into its own truth. Then, like a salt doll being immersed in the ocean, it will lose its very form and will identify with the ocean. So, that is the first part, Madikku Olithandu, that it is having borrowed Arivu. Then the Madikkul Olirum, Kanakamal gives us a beautiful support for us in the form that by saying Ul Olirum, Madikkul Olirum, Bhagavan, what he means is that it is the substrate, it is the Adharam, the Padi is the Adharam. So, from whichever point in the mind we exist, from whichever point in the existence we are in the relative plane, from there we can hold the Adhara. The Adhara is never out of its place. So the Padi, one limitation or one fullness it has is that it is omnipresent. It is present right through the existence in whatever conditioned way existence appears. In all that appearance, the Asipadatvam has not gone anywhere. The Supreme Being has not gone anywhere. It is the Adhara. Kanakamal says, by saying Ul Ulirum, he is not merely mentioning that the Pati, the Supreme Being, is inside the mind. He is also saying the Supreme Being is the very Adhara, is the very support. So you can reach him with the sadhana that the Guru prescribes to eliminate the ignorance that we learn that we cannot understand, we cannot measure. So all the measuring instruments of thoughts are let go of, and the truth of the measurer is seen, and that ends in or the Supreme Being is what the verse tells us. Then of course, when we see chapter 13 and chapter 12, very detailed facts are given about the sadhaka and the siddha. Let us forget the siddha for the moment, because we'll be discussing the siddha, the nature of the siddha from verses 31 onwards. Let us see what are the qualities for the jnana sadhaka that the chapter 12 and chapter 13, especially chapter 13, they are indicating, like the humility, the isolating oneself from the groups, then not seeking company, not indulging in social activities. All these are prescribed as the rules for the individual or the mind that is seeking jnana. And what Bhagavan does, see, if we take the practice of humility, then what does the sadhaka have to do? The sadhaka will have to humiliate or to understand that his own role through the Bhakti Marga he has walked, his own role in the whole team is of a minuscule fraction. When the whole presence of the whole earth itself is only a dot in the creation. Now, how great can the effort of an individual be? The individual is obviously a part of a whole team, the majority of which I am merely standing on the shoulders of. That one has to realize that whatever I am doing, this has had the help from millions and millions of beings, millions and millions of efforts preceding, of which I am just standing on the shoulders of. What my parents have done, what the rishis have done, what the whole of humanity has experimented, what the devas and pitrus and other people have all contributed. All that, on top of that, all the Guru Kripa I have received. On top of that, this small who am I am doing. So the humility has to be worked on in the Jnana Marga. One has to understand, and then the Jnana one is eligible for. Whereas Bhagavan says, if you take any of the qualities in chapter 13 prescribed for the sadhakas, there is quite a list about 6 verses or so are specifically on the qualities for the Jnana Margi, the one who wants to look at the Asipadatva, not the worship of the Supreme Purusha, but of the Supreme Being. What are the qualities? Adamba, the not show off, no show off at all, because it is the opposite of humility, isn't it? So that is also mentioned as a quality. What does Bhagavan say? You cannot measure this. You cannot measure the Supreme Being, that being humble I'll be able to reach, or not being a show off I'll be able to reach. But what purity, the humility and the non-show off brings, automatically the inward turnedness it brings. When one turns inward to offering oneself as food, as mentioned in verse number 20, or knowing that none of the thoughts can measure. None of the thoughts can measure the Supreme Being. Therefore, my only way is to turn inward and fix in the Supreme Being and abide there. Now, how does this equate for all the qualities mentioned by Sri Krishna? Is that Bhagavan says the purity of all those sadhanas, knowing what are the Jnana Marga sadhanas, Dilip ji would mention this again and again. Going through those lists of sadhanas, we get terrified that all these qualities, when are we ever going to get? It is really like that those qualities when mentioned, and when we see all the great ones, the great devotees who have lived such an exemplary life, we get worried whether when are we going to get these qualities. Whereas Bhagavan says, since you cannot measure them, you just keep doing only the who am I, being still. And the purity that will come from holding on to those qualities will come automatically. Because as Bhagavan says in the Arunachala Pancharatnam, that Amala Madhitanna, that is automatically it becomes Amala. When you try to hold the eye, Aham Edutan engagement, when you inquire, automatically the Amalatva, the purity, it is blessed. Automatically it is there. You don't need to think that I am humble, I am now not a show off. Whatever happens, happens. But one's purity or impurity is not dependent on any of those qualities, but it is dependent on holding the eye. Who feels he is humble? Who feels he is a show off? Who feels he should not be humble? Who feels he should not be a show off? All those thoughts are also eliminated. Not to put down any of the sadhanas mentioned in the chapter 13, but only to say that in this one verse, Madikuli Kandam, Madikul Volirum, Padiyai, Madine Ulle Madaki, Padil, Padithidalandri, Padiyai, Madial, Madithidalengan, Bhagavan covers all those qualities that the Jnana Sadhaka is required to observe and meticulously have and then offer it to God, offer it to the supreme knowledge. The normal knowledge is knowing as a medium. Knowledge as a medium is the relative knowledge. But knowing knowledge itself, arivai, ariyum, arivu. That consciousness which is Mei Arivu, says Kanakaman. Mei Arivu means that Arivu which knows itself, still not come into Asipadatva, but it is the Spurana. The Arive Ariyam Arivu is Spurana. How to come to that Mei Arivu? To completely understand that not a single thought, not a single action of the mind can ever measure. Only fixing the mind, Manasam to kill, Margane Krite, Naiva Manasam, eliminate all the measurements, all the thoughts by fixing the mind in the Padi. Padiyai, Madiyal, Maditita the Lengan, Madiyai. To know that you cannot know. When somebody quotes Socrates to Bhagavan, they say, Socrates says that I know that I do not know. The Socratic method is very interesting. What he does is, whenever he has to sit for the determination of what is really the best way of forming laws for the country, what is the best way of being an artist, what is the best way of being a musician, what is the best mode of being a good carpenter, he says they are all good, those people are all good, but they know their goodness. So by the act of knowing, the goodness becomes limited. Whereas I know that I do not know. Even as I engage in dialogue, I know that I do not know. That the source from which these things come, I do not know. And that is said to Bhagavan, that Socrates says that he does not know. But Bhagavan says that knowing that I do not know is not ignorance, it is knowledge, says Bhagavan. So whenever the mind is anxious to know, when it wants to know through the name of somebody or what will happen to that somebody or the name of the institution or what will happen to that institution, one should know that by that very act of knowing, we are limiting the existence of that and ourselves. So what we have to do, withdraw from that knowing, the relative knowing of the object, and fix that Madi in the source, the Padi. That's what Bhagavan says to Ganapati Muni in the Upadesham. Observe from where the I thought arises. There the mind means the entire creation. Whatever we have seen up to now, we have seen about the world from verses 5, 6, 7, then about all the various components in Jnana Marga, all that get absorbed in the Padi. In this verse, Bhagavan brings the culmination of the Karma Marga, Yoga Marga, Bhakti Marga, and Jnana Marga too, that the rest of the Jnana Marga, other than Vichara, are all completed in the first 22 verses. All those parts are covered completely. Where does Bhagavan bring? The ultimate of karma, bhakti, yoga, and jnana is in this verse, because all those are done with Madi, with the mind. Understand that the Supreme can never be measured with mind. That means can never be measured with work, with trying to unite, with loving as somebody apart. It cannot happen like that. Or even by knowing the qualities like humility, non-show off, and all those things in the Jnana Marga, by knowing all those things, you cannot know the Supreme. Therefore, the one solution for all the Margas is given. Madiyai ulle madakki, turn inward. This is Bhagavan's Upadesham to many. When somebody would be outward turned, the first thing Bhagavan would say is, turn inward. And to turn inward, the difficulty is that our vasanas for the outside things have to be burned. And the very act of self-inquiry starts that burning of the outside turning. So the turn inward, Madiyai ulle madakki, Padiyin padittidu, this particular solution of Bhagavan applies to the covering of all the margas. Of course, the verse number 20 had specifically covered seeing. The seeing is completed only in offering ourselves as the food of God. Then the knowing is completed only by offering all the thoughts or all the measurements and fix the mind in the source. Padiyil padittidu, says Bhagavan. And we come to so the Ulladu Narpadu is not only about the Vichara, it is a complete look at the whole Sadhana Loka. And then from verse number 23 onwards, we start the definition of problem in the Viveka segment, about the Viveka, about the ego, 23, 24, 25, 26. Then the sadhana segment of 27, 28, 29, and we can include 30. These verses now start Bhagavan's core teachings. So up to now, it is the Viveka on the rest of the teachings and the relationship of rest of the teachings in the other margas to Bhagavan's teachings. Now he is going to take us to his core teachings, how ego is the source of all problems. Taking the ego to the source is the solution to all problems. That is the area where we are entering. But the Viveka about the first 22 verses helps us to understand the magnificence of the teaching about the root problem being the I thought and the root solution to all problems being elimination of that I thought by merging it, by fixing it in its source, the self. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in practice of Madiyai Padiyil Padithidudal, which happens directly in taking the I thought to the source. We can sit in practice till 8 o'clock, when we will have Akka give her the summary of this verse. Revatima, you can help us out with the time. Number. Ramana. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. Here, every time we say this, prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. In today's verse, Bhagavan tells us, shining within, shining as the support, shining as the adhara. And beautifully, Nandakumarji has highlighted two of the aspects of the verse. The first, that the light, the mind, is not its own source of light. And in this, the word which Bhagavan is using is Madik Oli Tandu. He is giving light to the mind. Which is giving light? The self is giving light to the mind. That light is being given, gifted to the mind. So it took my mind to one of Sadhu Swami's compositions, wherein he says, Kodupavan perida alladu anda kodai porul perida. See, somebody gives us a gift. Is the giver of the gift larger, huger, more important, more significant, or is the gift given to us more significant? In our lives, it often seems to be as if the gift is more significant. The light is given to the mind. The mind becomes more significant. The thoughts become more significant than the source of the thoughts. Here again, today, the clarity was given to us that there is a sort of a stage by stage gifting of this light. The thoughts receive the light from the I thought or the Aham Spurana in all its purity. And the Aham Spurana rises from the self. So, for us, what is it that we value, or what is it that we need to value? Of course, the verse is looking at experiencing the Supreme, experiencing the Pati, experiencing the Supreme, experiencing the highest. How can one experience the highest if one is all the time engaged with that which is the most trivial? This was one of the points which Nandakumarji brought before us today. See, the earth itself is so insignificant in that there is this body which is so insignificant, and the concerns of the body which manifest as thoughts. So we are constantly engaged in the experiences that the body is undergoing through thoughts. And these thoughts are lit by the I thought. How significant is even the I thought to us? How important is the I thought to us? We seem to have our lives centered around the I. I seem to be at the center of my life. However, all my attention is given only to thoughts which are objects, which are lit by the I thought. I do not even seem to be eager to turn the attention back to experience that which is the basis of all these thoughts, that which is giving light to all these thoughts. What is this I? So this is the first question. So Bhagavan takes us in self-inquiry. Back to this, these are all merely thoughts. Ask, for whom are these thoughts? For whom are these thoughts? They are for me. Why am I so concerned about all these gifts of the I? Why is the I itself of so little value? Why is the source, the power, the energy, the light, why is it of so little value? Why this huge dependence on objects from moment to moment all the time? Why cannot our attention turn back with this question, for whom is this thought? For whom are these thoughts? This is the Padiyal Padittidal, to turn the attention back to that which is higher Pati. Of course, here is the supreme one. But for all the thoughts, the I thought is the supreme. So the first step which Bhagavan gives us is turn back from the thoughts to the supreme in the thoughts, to the supreme in the mind, which is the I thought. And thereafter, when that happens actually, when the attention turns away from all thoughts, from all the other thoughts onto the I, only onto the I thought in its purity, what happens is it will shine forth as the Aham Spurana. There again, Nandakumar ji keeps telling us every now and then, don't ask for anything from the Aham Spurana. Let us not ask for the gifts of the Spurana. Let us not ask for the gifts of the I thought. Let us just allow it to be, because as Sadhu Swami says, Koduttavan Kodupavan Perida, Kodai Porul Perida. Is the gift larger, or is the one who gives the gift larger? Should we not value the one who gives the gift? He says it's like a child who is given a toy by the mother. If the child becomes so engaged with the toy, so completely engaged with the toy, as to say, I don't want the mother at all, what would be the plight of the child? Our plight is somewhat like that when we are completely engaged with the supremacy of thoughts, giving them place, giving them a higher place than the very source. At once one comes to the I thought, then if one does not ask of anything from the I thought, ask for anything from the I thought, then automatically it will merge into its source. Its source. It will seek, it has ceased to seek Kodai Porul. What is happening because of the light shining in the I thought? It is enabled to grasp other thoughts, other objects. But if it does not seek these gifts, if it turns its attention back, then it will automatically merge there with the question, who am I? If the attention is turned further back, then it merges in the source. The second very, very significant point which was brought home to us today was also referred to by Nandakumar sir as given by Kanakamma, was the availability of the source. Because Madikkoli Tandu Ammadikkul Ulirum, it is always shining there. It is not away. The giver of this gift is not far away. The giver of this gift is not inaccessible. The giver of this gift, on the other hand, is ever available. Available in every thought. Every thought is lighted only by the self. Every thought is lighted by the I thought is lighted by the self. Every thought is therefore lighted by the self. So every thought, Dilip would often say that every thought is an opportunity to turn back to the source. Every thought is an opportunity to experience the source. In one context, actually, Bhagavan is asked, why this apparent reality, Bhagavan? Why this world? Why all this? Why this Maya? Why all this? And Bhagavan, in that context, of course, in another context, you would say, where is it? It is not there. Or find out for whom it is. But in that context, he says it is only to make you turn inward. This is there only to make you turn inward. It is there only to make you question. It is there, if at all we say that is the world exists, says Bhagavan, in order to make us question its reality. To question, to recognize, oh, if this world is there, it must have a source. If thought is there which rises and sets, it must have a source which is relatively stable compared to that thought. The I thought is relatively stable compared to the other thoughts. So we can understand when we look at a thought coming and going, this cannot be the permanent reality. This cannot be the supreme, because the supreme cannot come and go. So the thought cannot be supreme. Anything that is experienced as a thought cannot be the supreme. That's why Bhagavan says, how can you recognize? How can you realize? How can you perceive the supreme with a thought? A thought comes and goes, but the supreme does not come and go. So you cannot experience the supreme with the thought. This is revealed to us by the very movement of the thought. We don't have to seek anywhere outside. If we look at our own minds, if we look at the thoughts, we will immediately realize how futile they are. We will realize that no thought in our millions of thoughts has ever stayed with us. And if it has never stayed with us, how can it give us a permanent happiness? That which is itself completely impermanent, how can it give us a lasting joy? So the thought can never give us joy. This is very evident when we see the nature of the thoughts. And on seeing this, if our mind seeks that true happiness, which is the Pati, which is the Supreme, which is the Lord, which is what we are all seeking. What is it that we are all seeking? That continuous, unbroken happiness. That is Supreme. That is the Lord. That is the nature of the Lord. In another context, Nandakumarji has pointed out to us that the Lord's nature is pointed out to us in Ulladu Narpadu itself as that which is in another talk, in talks with Ramana Maharshi, he says, it is that which is blissful, ever blissful. So that is the supreme. How can thought give us that perception? It cannot, because it goes away. It goes away. So what is the answer? Turn to its source, says Bhagavan. It is available. It is available here and now. Turn to the source of the thought. And then we go to the I thought. And then again, we realize that the I thought also goes away. It goes away in deep sleep. So it cannot be the source of its own light. It cannot be source of permanent bliss. Everlasting bliss. It cannot be because it goes away. So then our attention turns back to the source. But this whole process is possible. The sadhana is possible. But we can turn back. This is also an assurance which is beautifully given in this verse when Bhagavan says you immerse the mind in the source. Other than this, there is no way. But this is the way, and this way is available. When Bhagavan says, other than this, there is no way, he's also telling us this way is there. It is open to us. It is available to us. What greater grace can be there than Bhagavan telling us, here is the way. This is the way. You can take it. And you don't have to worry about any other way. You don't have to worry because nothing else is going to take you. You don't have any options. See, options are always confusing. We don't have any option. Just go to this. Go directly to this. Get back directly to the source, says Bhagavan. Don't wander here and there because nothing is going to be of any use. Just get back. And this is possible. This is available. And it is available to you always. So all you have to do is try. Keep trying to turn the mind back and fix it in the source. This is the great grace of Bhagavan that has been revealed to us today through this verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana.